Welcome to Lyric Lab Poetry. In this video, I'm going to be talking about writer's block and sharing some strategies that I hope will help you to combat, to overcome, and maybe even head off writer's block before it rears its ugly head. And talking about heads, it is of course a beast, a monster with many different heads. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It affects different writers at different stages during their career, and its duration can be a few days. At its worst, it can go on for months, maybe even years. So let's get started. So writer's block, of course, is just the inability to write, maybe even pick up the pen or sit down at the laptop and even start to think about writing. And I want to start by talking about three causal elements, things that I feel are either there or not there when writer's block strikes. Not all the time, but often. And the first one is time. Time. Many writers are, of course, people who wear different hats throughout their life, and often that will relate to work. You may be holding down a 40-hour week job, and frankly, after a full day at work, who wants to come home and then get creative? Who has the energy to do that? And it may be that all you feel you're fit for is to sit down and vegetate in front of your favorite TV show, and rightly so, because your brain and your body is telling you it's time to relax, it's time to recuperate. Out of a place of diligence, perhaps, or dedication to your art, you might try and kind of, tough it out and kind of just tell yourself, well, no, I have to do this because this is the thing that I feel really defines me. Art is really the thing that I feel is the one thing in my life that gives me purpose. And if you are one of those people, and I totally understand the kind of thinking behind this strategy to kind of push on through, but it's not very practical. When you lift yourself out of your own shoes and look at yourself from a different perspective, if you are facing the challenges of a working week and trying to balance that with a life in art, it's going to be very difficult. So what you need to do is you need to plan ahead and make sure you have some dedicated time, ring-fenced, that is just set aside for you and your writing. That's the first primary goal. The second thing I want to talk about is permission. I think often a writer's block can strike when we refuse to give ourselves permission to mess up, when we refuse to give ourselves permission to make mistakes, to write bad poetry, and just write for the sake of writing. And the third thing, I think that's an important factor, which relates to the permission we give ourselves just to write, is play, a sense of play. It must be central to the artist's work that we embrace what we do with a sense of play, playfulness, that kind of curiosity, that childlike quality of inquisitiveness, and a sense maybe of chaos, perhaps, of kind of anarchy, and a sense of fun. That's really, really important. So those are three factors that I identify as either being present or lacking or missing from the writer's life when writer's block strikes. So here are three strategies that I want to share. The first one is about reading. And the advice we often give writers is to read variously, read a mix of different genres and read often. That's very good advice. When it comes to writer's block, one strategy I use is to go back to the work of writers, whose work I really, really love, and reread their work and do that before I go to bed, because I feel sort of, it's the kind of writing that takes your breath away or makes you gasp out loud when you're reading it, that kind of level of inspiration. And what I find is if I read this kind of poetry before I go to bed, the following morning, something will have permeated, something would have filtered through. Is it a pale imitation of the writer whose work I love? Maybe. That's not really important. Or is it perhaps that their DNA, their writerly DNA is mixed with mine and something has emerged, some kind of seed of an idea which has come through from their work and spilled over into mine? That's a really good strategy for writer's block. But there are two others that I encourage you to practice. And the first one is free writing practice. Give yourself each day 10 minutes of free writing practice. In other words, you're going to set a timer and you are going to just write for 10 minutes without thinking about anything. It could be that I just look out of the window and use that as inspiration for this free writing practice, and just don't stop. And the reason I think a timer is important is that we feel that under pressure of this kind of finite time, that we don't stop and think or edit or censor what we're writing. And it's just the act of writing, getting the writing out, the genesis of thought out of your body, out of your mind and onto the page. And the third strategy I find very useful, and I don't have, just give me 1 minute. I love these notebooks. They're very kind of flimsy and flexible. They fit very easily into the back of a pocket, and I fill them up with all kind of nonsense. And I do that on a daily basis. It may be an image or an idea or an observation that strikes me, and then I start riffing on that observation. So I'll give you an example of that. This morning I was lying in bed and I was looking at the door, and the door to the bedroom was open, and the light coming through the window kind of struck the doorknob and cast a shadow which was stretching or reaching towards the empty space of the door frame. And I felt, well, that's kind of almost like the door wants to close itself. It doesn't want to be open, it wants to be closed. Or is this shadow a kind of memory of it being closed? And I thought about the door as a kind of binary thing, as either being open or closed. And then I started kind of thinking about the door before it was a door, before it was hung, before it was hinged. And I thought about the word unhinged, and the idea that the door is anchored to the wall, is anchored to the door frame. And all these kind of curious thoughts came from this one image that I'd taken and written down, and then the kind of splurge of secondary and not the primary thought, but the ones that come after. So I think that journaling is really important, and that's the number 3 in my list of strategies. Other journaling can just be part of the free writing exercise that I just mentioned, but I use it really primarily for observations throughout the day, or maybe even I read the news daily, and of course most of the news is terrible, miserable kind of world events, but often I'll be captured by some small story that seems maybe insignificant or sort of lighter news items, and think about how that strange story might manifest itself into a poem. Do they ever become poems? Well, sometimes not. But I think it's important just to carry this book around with you so you can jot down ideas as they come. So 3 causal elements, 3 strategies to tackle writer's block. And now I want to move on and give you 3 prompts that I hope will help. Sometimes I find that when you're kind of struck down by writer's block, that you go in search of a good poetry prompt and they all just seem uninspiring. And that's because you're stuck in this rut. And in that kind of situation, I think it's good to have a writer's prompt that maybe is a little looser, a little freer. And that's what this first poetic prompt is. You're going to just take a color, any color, and you're going to write down that word on a blank piece of paper, and then just start playing and riffing with that word. Maybe it's association with the things that you would usually associate with that color, and then maybe more personal associations you have with that color. Maybe then entering or exploring the word in terms of sensory. It's not just about the visual. What does that, if that word tasted, if that color tasted of something, what would it taste of? And to explore it on that sensory level, and then just explore the word, the components of the word. Is it, how many syllables does it have? Is it a short word or a long word? Are there other words that it contains? Does it rhyme with other words? And just to play and riff on this, it's a useful one because as a starting place, it's not kind of so narrow. It's giving you a broader kind of framework within which just to play, just to write, just to explore. I think when we go back to this idea of permission, often the onus is on the end product. We're nowhere near the end product, and we shouldn't be thinking about, well, this needs to be a brilliant poem. It needs to be submitted to a literary magazine. No, we're nowhere near that. We are in a place of exploration and play. So time, permission, and our sense of play, and then within those parameters, we are going to write this poem or just experiment with this kind of color prompt. The second prompt is a little more specific. It is to write a letter. And again, I think using the timer is a really good technique for this, because again, it stops you from censoring what you put down on the page. And the prompt is a very simple one. It is to write a letter to an abstract concept, an idea, maybe the word happiness or loneliness, or maybe you write a poem, a letter to love or to grief. Dear grief, and then just write, and in an uncensored way, freely for 10 minutes. And the third prompt I'm going to give you today is actually to return to an earlier prompt. Right at the beginning of this Lyric Lab poetry series, I started with an A to Z of literary devices and poetry prompts together to help kind of strengthen your writing and delve into your own imagination. And one of those was anaphora. Anaphora is the technique of taking a few words and repeating them at the beginning of every single line. We're going to use that device, but this time we're going to tie it together with a line of famous poetry, or maybe the first line of a poem you love. Let's, for example, say we're going to start this with a line by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. And then the second line will start with, do not go, and you're going to complete that line. And then the third line will start, do not go, and then the fourth, do not go, and do not go, and do not go. And so this is, again, an exercise in taking inspiration from the work of others, but giving you the freedom and the framework with which to experiment and explore, and just to get writing, just to get some ideas down without worrying about where they lead. So I really hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that helps. If you're struggling, use those strategies to help you on a daily basis, and the prompts to get you writing again. And if you have any tips or tricks or advice that you find particularly helpful, please do share them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. And if you have, please do click the like button. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do click the subscribe button too. It really helps to grow the channel. And there are other ways you can contribute to the channel. I've got a Buy Me a Coffee link and a Patreon link in the description below. And of course, I'll be back soon with more poetry content.